everyone to the August 20th City of Salem Planning Commission meeting. We are now in order. As told, bang the gavels. There we are. Linda, if you could call the roll, please. Jennifer, sorry. Jennifer, please call the roll.
Commissioner Pott? Here. Commissioner Heller?
Here.
Commissioner Rhodes? Here. Commissioner Slater?
Here.
Commissioner Truitt?
Here.
Commissioner Villarreal?
Here.
We have one.
Great, thank you. Is there anyone here who has signed up to make comments? Do you have public comments today? That are on agenda items? I'm sorry. Are you speaking on the agenda items? Yes, okay, we'll get you. Is there anyone here who is not, who's speaking so that is not on the agenda? Okay, in that case, I guess we're gonna move to your minutes today. Yes, okay, so I will get you a motion, minutes to, who's assigned to review it today? Commissioner Pott. Commissioner Pott, I will take a motion.
I move to approve the minutes from the June 11th and August 6th meetings of the planning commission.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
Second from Commissioner Heller. Is there any discussion on the motion? Any corrections? All right, if the clerk will call the roll, please.
Commissioner Pott? Aye. Commissioner Heller?
Aye.
Commissioner Rhodes? Aye. Commissioner Slater?
Aye.
Commissioner Truitt?
Aye.
Commissioner Villarreal?
Aye. All right, motion passes. Let's see, we have no resolutions and no action items, so we're moving to public hearings. We don't actually have a public hearing, but we have deliberations on our staff report. Do we need a recap? Let's do that, just so we're all on the same here.
Yeah, good. Thank you, Planning Commission, the First Division Planning Division. On August 6th, there was a hearing on proposed PUD and petition. The petition would create two parcels, and then one of the parcels would be further divided with a planning and development and subdivision, creating 11 lots and an open space area that would be adjacent to the existing golf course fairway, which remains parcel 1. At the conclusion of the hearing, there was a request by the Homeowners Association to leave the record open. And the commission voted to leave the record open for a period of 7 days for additional testimony, 7 days for rebuttal, and then that can have 7 final days if they elected to use it for final written argument. And as indicated in the emails from out today, we didn't receive any additional testimony during the second rebuttal period. We did, however, receive comments in the initial 7-day open record period that were transmitted to the Planning Commission and are included in your packet this evening. And the applicant has waived their final 7-day period for final written arguments. So we are poised to be able to do deliberations this evening. And in the staff report memo that was provided, there were 2 revisions to 2 of the conditions. Condition 3 revises the condition to allow the possibility that the parties agree to have 1 HOA for the development, and that would be incorporated into the existing Creekside HOA requirements for maintenance. And then, but if they were to not agree on that, there would still be the ability to have their own separate one. So all of the requirements under the code to maintain all the private facilities and open space would be covered no matter what. And then there was a revision in condition 10 that the stormwater requirement that allows that to seek design exception from the engineers alternative due to the topography of the site.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Bryce? All right, before we move to deliberations, let me ask if anyone has an ex parte conflict or conflict of interest they need to disclose. Everyone here at the last meeting, is that correct? Let me stop. Let me start this again. Okay. So, not everyone here was at the last meeting, is that correct? Not okay. So let's, I guess, do this in 2 pieces.
Olivia Diaz, planning, billing for the planning administrator. Did you review the hearing and all the materials and you're able to?
Yeah, I watched the YouTube video and reviewed materials actually before the meeting and then subsequently.
So in this case, again, I will ask, is there anyone who's participating in the deliberations that have a conflict of interest or an ex parte conversation they need to disclose? Okay. So hearing none, then let's go forward, and I will look to Vice President Heller for a motion.
I move that we accept the staff report on a case number, let's see. Case number PUD sub R urban growth boundary ADJ 24-01. 700 to 800 blocks of Creekside Drive Southeast.
Thank you for that mouthful.
Yes.
Better than me. Is there a second to the motion? Commissioner Truitt, are you nodding yes?
I'll second.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Rhodes. We have a motion and a second, and we're now to deliberations then. Is there anyone that has a question or would like to make a motion?
I would like to make a motion for an amendment to the conditions.
All right, go ahead, please.
And I'm not sure if this needs to be made into, so maybe someone can speak to that, but my two amendments would be to require the continuation of the sidewalk along Creekside. So that it connects. I don't have it in front of me, but so continuing from its current stopping point, so that sidewalk is completed. And then on the new street to the new lots in the subdivision, that sidewalk and landscaping strip are provided on both sides of that slope.
Thank you. It looks like Bryce has pulled up an image of that. So we can stop and give people a moment. We can give people a moment to speak to it, and then I think we have a staff comment.
I have a staff question on clarification of the motion. So for the sidewalk along Creekside, are you anticipating there be a landscape strip and then the sidewalk, or do you want curb line sidewalk? Because we need to be specific in the condition as to which you're petitioning. The remainder of the sidewalks in Creekside are curb line along that segment. Due to the topography, that's pretty full.
I think that might be worth discussion. If we could include that, I'm not sure if that's possible.
I think it's probably your initiative to include it or not. I mean, you can specify right now which of the two you would prefer.
Well, ideally, I would prefer a sidewalk with a landscaping strip. So I guess curbside sidewalk and landscaping on the north side.
So that would be condition one. And do you have a question, Aurora?
Yeah, sorry, thank you. My other question is, would you on landscape strip for our local streets, the standard is 8. We do reduce that to 4 is the minimum planting strip. So I would ask that you specify the width of the planting strip that you're asking for as well.
I think based on the site conditions, the 4-foot strip adjacent to the sidewalk is acceptable.
All right, would you be willing to restate your motion then, Commissioner Kwan? Just so we have. I just wanted to.
Yeah, we had the initial motion to adopt the staff report, so.
Right. And
This could be a substitute motion for that. So you need to get a second on it after you do it.
right, so I would like to clarify what the motion is. And then we'll see if there's a second. Okay.
Okay, so restating the motion is to require along Creekside continuation of the sidewalk, curbside sidewalk along Creekside Drive with a 4-foot landscape strip. And then on the new street to access the new subdivided properties, that we require a sidewalk and landscaping strip on both sides of the street. So that would include the north side of the new street.
I anticipate a question about the size of the second landscape strip.
Well, if I may jump in, I think, because of the size of the lots in relation to the street and the golf course, any additional, sidewalk, and landscape strip on the north side will impinge upon the golf course area and so At staff's recommendation, would be that, you know, if there was a desire to continue the sidewalk, continue the main sidewalk on Creekside Drive and then allow the existing, you know, proposal with the landscape strip on the north side and the sidewalk on the south side to suffice for the private street.
Okay, then I'll try to restate the whole.
I think yes.
All right. So new motion then is to require the continuation of the sidewalk along Creekside Drive, curbside sidewalk with a 4-foot landscape strip. On the newly added street of the subdivision, I would like to add a landscape strip to the sidewalk along the south side of that road.
Okay,
That's,
Thank you,
what I call
Commissioner
it.
Claude.
Yeah, that's, yeah.
all right, do we have any more questions before we actually see if there's support for this? No, okay.
Trees and driveway spacing, is that gonna be an issue?
For consideration, when we have this type of a development site, when it's kind of difficult to get street trees in with the utility lines and the driveways. And so that was one of the reasons that we didn't recommend the street trees along the south side of the new internal street, because with the duplex lots, they'll have fairly wide driveways and we didn't think that they could accommodate street trees. So there may be conflicts with that, based on the final utility and driveway plans, which we don't.
Which on Creekside Drive, will be no driveways, you know, for lots, you know, 3 through 11, so there isn't that conflict, utility limitation of the trees.
My general concern is that we're providing a sidewalk with no landscape or street trees where people are walking. And where that sort of canopy cover is very important for not only shading the people who are along the street, but also just providing that livability that we, I think, are striving for within Salem. So if there's a way that we can accommodate that in some fashion, I think that would be very appropriate.
So I think, let me ask, do you feel that you've received the information that you need from staff to go ahead with your motion? Okay, and so the motion that you most recently made is the one that, okay, so at this point, let's go and see if there's a second for this motion.
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a second from Commissioner Heller, now we're gonna discuss it. So do you have anything else you'd like to add, or should I open this up to questions from other commissioners now?
I don't have too much to add. I think just briefly to expand on the livability concern, and we heard concerns from the neighboring property residents that this is a place where people enjoy walking, and I think that it really is an important part of all housing development, that we not only provide housing for people, but we also provide communities that over time will continue to provide that very livable and comfortable and safe place for people to walk. And that's it.
All right, so do we have any questions for Commissioner Claude? Go ahead, Commissioner Villarreal.
So, guess I am assuming that there's a logic behind putting the sidewalk on the south side of the private road so that it actually goes to the lots where the houses are going to be. But I was wondering if it would kind of address your concerns and also save some space if the sidewalk was on the north side where we're planning to put trees. It would then reduce 2 crosswalks of the private street, so we could have landscape trees on the north side of the private road, the sidewalk on the north side of the private road, and people could walk under trees in a much more hospitable environment, avoiding 2 additional crosswalks and saving some space. This could be a concern. The sidewalk would then not actually go to people's houses, but is that something we're anticipating a lot of people doing? I don't know.
I would anticipate many people would walk from their house to the sidewalk, so I think it's important to have a sidewalk running along the properties as
Are there other questions? Commissioner Rhodes?
As far as, I don't know if this is a question that staff can answer, but when each property is developed, there will be trees required on those properties as well as the landscape trees from the street, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So there would be shade from the trees planted in those kind of little pockets of land.
Yeah, that's correct. Your tree ordinance does require a certain number of trees to be planted on the lot based on the lot size. And in this case, with the curb line sidewalks on the south side of the Villa Loop, they would essentially almost look like yard trees and, you know, like just in something in the front yard rather than, you know, having the landscape strip.
Do we have an idea of where those would actually be required then, or is it just generally on the lot?
We don't specify where they have to be. It's the applicant, whoever the building permit applicant, is the ability to place the trees based on, you know, the siding of the home where it's located on the lot generally.
Are there other questions? Commissioner True?
Yeah, generally, I'm inclined not to vote in favor of this, primarily because the landscape, as Bryce indicated, landscaping for each individual lot would be included. But more so, I'm concerned about adding conditions, final hour, where we're near completion and review of this. We're not really engineers or designers for this development. And I think we can understand that we want trees, we want shading, we want more sidewalks, but at the same time, it's a greater burden for the development and could potentially extend our review of this. And I think we're up against the wall here, if I'm not mistaken, we're up against the timeline. So I just want to make sure that we're reviewing this within our scope for what we can suggest for the development. And I think with the comments provided for the inclusion of landscaping for each individual lot, that for me, that suffices.
Cool. So I heard a question in there is whether the conditions that Commissioner Fott is proposing is within our scope. So let me ask a question to our planner administrator pro tem here, if that is the case.
Sure.
So yes, so that is within our scope. That's helpful information. I didn't hear any questions on the proposal to continue the sidewalk on the south side of Creekside Drive. Are there, which side was that again?
North side.
Pardon?
The north side.
The north side. Does anyone have any questions about that?
I have just a question as far as the topography of that land. Would there be a retaining wall then needed to be able to get a sidewalk and plantings along that side, or what would that overall impact be on those lots?
Well, it does slope out from the edge of the road as it exists up the side. So the more, you know, you add to the width of what needs to be, you know, along the north side of the street, it does push everything further into the hillside. And so sidewalks have to be a certain grade. They can't be tilted up at an angle, of course, so for ADA. So that would require a little bit of, you know, grading into the side there to ensure that is met. And then the landscape strip would be a little bit more flexible, I would imagine, being maybe up on a hill, maybe not at the same level, you know, of the sidewalk, and up to more, you know, there's not aware of anything in that code that says that the landscape strip has to be at the same grade as the sidewalk.
The landscape strip could be at a different height than the sidewalk. As to whether or not a retaining wall would be necessary is probably a question for their engineering on it.
All right, thank you. Are there other questions on the new sidewalk? So, Commissioner Fott, do you have a preference on taking your two suggestions, your two conditions as one motion or two motions?
You can separate them into two, because it sounds like they're two different.
Is that not supposed to do the second motion?
I think we can, we basically have, there's two parts, so we have two proposals, so we can vote on each one of them.
Separately, okay. Great. So if there's no objection, I think we'll do that. So I guess the first part of the motion would be to add the sidewalk on the north side of Creekside Drive, is that correct?
Yes.
Yes, so that will be what we are voting on. Any questions on that particular part? Okay, that's good. Oh, go ahead, Mr. Truth.
Right, so as a dad, kids on bikes. When they come out of their garage, or people come out of their house, and the sidewalk is across the street from the homes. Does that more or less defeat the purpose of having the sidewalk on the north side? Am I mistaken, or are we suggesting to move the sidewalk? Am I mistaken?
It's a continuation of an existing sidewalk along the north side of Creekside.
Creeks, north side of Creekside.
Right, this is not for the new road at all.
All right, I'm mistaken.
Thank you. All right, I think at this point we can ask Jennifer to call the roll.
Commissioner Cobb? Aye. Commissioner Heller?
Aye.
Commissioner Rhodes?
Aye.
Commissioner Slater?
Aye.
Commissioner Truitt?
Nay, I have to go with nay on this one, just because I understand the premise, but I need more time to digest this, so for now.
It's completely appropriate.
Commissioner Villaraigosa?
Okay, motion to the amendment. Amendment to the motion passes. All right, we'll now go to the second. Can you restate that for us, please, Commissioner Fott?
Which version?
Adding the landscape strips.
Yes. So, motion to add a landscaping strip to the currently proposed sidewalk along the new road at the subdivision.
And for discussion, I will just say, I'm a little concerned about the viability of a 4-foot planting strip for trees. So I will just share that. Not sure where that leaves me yet, but I will share that. Are there any other questions before we move to a vote? All right, again, Jennifer, if you're willing to call the roll.
Commissioner Cobb? Aye. Commissioner Heller?
Nay.
Commissioner Rhodes?
Nay.
Commissioner Slater?
Aye.
Commissioner Truitt?
Nay,
Commissioner Villaraigosa?
All right, motion fails. Now we're back to the underlying motion. Are there any further questions on the underlying motion? For the staff to adopt the staff report with the new condition that we just agreed on. Let's say that the majority, that we just agreed on. Any further questions on that? All right, call the roll, please.
Commissioner Cobb? Aye. Commissioner Heller?
Aye.
Commissioner Rhodes?
Aye.
Commissioner Slater?
Aye.
Commissioner Truitt?
aye,
Commissioner Villaraigosa?
Motion passes. All right, that was fun. Thank you very much. We're now going on to our next public hearing, is that right? 5.2, appeal of subdivision of tentative plan class 2 adjustment. I remember my order. That means that we have a staff presentation beginning. Sure. Jen, please read the criteria first.
This is a public hearing to consider the appeal of the planning administrator's decision to approve case number sub ADJ 24-04 for the property located at the 1800 block of Park Avenue Northeast. The criteria applicable to this hearing are listed in the Salem Revised Code under chapters 205.010D subdivision tentative plan and 250.005D2 class 2 adjustment. Failure to raise an issue prior to the close of the public hearing with statements or evidence sufficient to afford the planning commission and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals on that issue. A similar failure to raise constitutional issues relating to proposed conditions of approval precludes an action for damages in circuit court. Prior to the conclusion of the hearing, any participant may request an opportunity to present additional evidence or testimony. The planning commission will then either continue the public hearing or leave the record open for at least 7 days.
All right, thank you. So before we begin, I forgot, so I will start again. I'd like to ask if any of the commissioners, if anyone had an ex parte conversation or conflict of interest that they need to report. Go ahead then, please.
All right, thank you and good evening. My name is Aaron Franco with the Community Planning and Development Department. Presenting before you tonight the appeal of subdivision tentative plan and class 2 adjustment application at the 1800 block of Park Avenue Northeast. I'd like to request that the presentation, staff report, and attachments and testimony be entered into the record. We did receive testimony today. The consolidated application includes a request for a subdivision tentative plan to divide property approximately 0.82 acres in size into a total of 6 lots. The application includes a request to increase the maximum number of flag lots allowed for subdivision from 15% to 66%, and a request to eliminate street spacing and connectivity standards along Park Avenue, which would require providing connecting streets at intervals no greater than 600 feet. The subject property is located in Northeast Salem. It's near the Oregon State Fairgrounds, shown here on the larger vicinity map. The property has frontage along Park Avenue, which is designated as a local street. Park Avenue connects to Sunnyview North, or Sunnyview Road Northeast, which is a minor arterial. And to the south, it connects to Market Street Northeast, which is designated as a major arterial. And further to the east is Interstate 5. The subject property is zoned RS, single family residential, which is shown in yellow. Properties immediately surrounding the property share that same RS zone designation. Further south towards Market Street is RM2 zone property in orange. And then along Market Street is a mixed use designation shown in purple. The property is approximately 0.82 acres in size. There is a single family dwelling that exists near the southeast corner of the property. That home will remain. And currently under construction is an accessory dwelling unit and garage that will serve that existing home. And we have a photo here along Park, which shows kind of the north end of the home towards the vacant portion of the lot. And this is another photo of the property showing the home and the ADU garage that's under construction. And this slide shows the tentative subdivision plan, which calls for the creation of 6 lots. The existing dwelling and accessory dwelling unit will remain on proposed lot 6. All proposed lots were found to be consistent with minimum lot size and dimension requirements of the RS zone. Flag lots are defined as a lot that's set back from the street at the rear or the side of another lot, with vehicular access to the street provided by a flag lot access way. The proposed subdivision results in a total of 6 lots. Of those 6, lots 2 through 5 are flag lots. Development standards in the Salem Revised Code limit the amount of flag lots that can be created by a subdivision. And the primary purpose for this limit is to promote street and sidewalk connectivity, specifically in larger subdivisions. However, in this case, due to the small size and infill nature of this subdivision request, staff found that the purpose was not applicable and that granting the adjustment would allow for development of additional housing consistent with our dwelling unit density goals for the single family residential zone. Street connectivity and spacing standards require that block lengths and street spacing don't exceed 600-foot intervals. So in this case, the block length of Park Avenue between Sunnyview and Market, it's approximately 1,500 feet, which doesn't conform to current block length and street spacing standards. So even if a mid-block east-west street connection were to be provided, as shown here, it would still exceed the 600-foot requirement and would meet alternative street standards. The minimum width for a local street is 60 feet, which means that if a street connection were to be required, it would occupy roughly half of this property. And given existing development constraints to the west, would not likely result in a full street connection between Evergreen and Park Avenue. And would result in a street network that's more beneficial than the proposed street network. Public comments were received during the initial public comment period from neighboring parties and from the North Lancaster Neighborhood Association. A summary of the comments received and staff responses provided in the staff report. On July 17th, a timely notice of appeal was filed by neighboring parties. Objections and concerns include concerns with the adjustment request to increase the number of flag lots and objections to the proposed dwelling unit density. Concerns with lack of available on-site parking, concerns with adverse impacts of livability, and concerns with design for the on-site infiltration pond for stormwater. So as indicated a few slides back, the planning administrator found that the adjustment request to increase the number of flag lots was consistent with the adjustment approval criteria. Included in the notice of appeal were concerns that each of the proposed single-family lots could be created with a single-family dwelling that could also have an accessory dwelling unit similar to lot 6. However, our general development standards provide a limit on the number of dwelling units that can be served by a flag lot access way. That limits 4 dwelling units, which includes accessory dwelling units. As a submittal item for a subdivision, the applicant is required to identify the number of units proposed for each flag lot. With this application, they did so, and they indicated that 1 single-family dwelling unit is provided for each of the flag lot. So duplexes or accessory dwelling units would not be permitted here. It should also be noted that the subject property is currently it's comprised of 2 legal lots. Each of the lots would support development of middle housing, including construction of 4-family uses or even cottage clusters. So this means that the applicant could choose to withdraw the subdivision application and instead apply for building permits to construct denser middle housing, 4 units per lot or a total of 8 units on this property. This path would not require a land use approval, would require subdivision, so there would be no opportunity for public comment or opportunity for appeal. For parking, the city recently updated parking requirements for single-family residential uses. There's no longer a minimum requirement for parking for single-family dwellings. There is a maximum parking allowance for single-family dwellings, and that's 3 spaces. So the tentative plan, it gives some preliminary building footprints and some ideas of where driveways could be located on the access way to serve the development. So development standards for a number of parking spaces and driveway dimensions will be verified by planning staff at the time of future building permit for each of the dwelling units. Parking is prohibited on flag lot access ways. There's no approval criteria related to the potential for code violations or future code violations that city staff can apply to approval of a subdivision tentative plan or for residential dwelling permits. If there are issues in the future, parking violations can be reported to the City of Salem Parking Services for enforcement. And finally, there's concerns and objections regarding the proposed stormwater water infiltration pond. In general, all subdivision applications are required to comply with applicable local, state, and federal regulations for treatment and detention of stormwater runoff. City Public Works design standards require that stormwater flow control be designed to contain a 100-year storm event, which is a rainfall event that has a 1% chance of occurring at a particular location in a particular year. And our standards also require the use of green stormwater infrastructure to treat drainage and reduce leak flows. A preliminary stormwater report was provided with this application, which demonstrates the use of green stormwater infrastructure to the maximum extent feasible by providing flow control, which is detention, and treatment in the form of a rain garden facility. There are no storm lines along the property's frontage of Park Avenue. The preliminary stormwater report indicates that the proposed rain garden will infiltrate water. And the preliminary geotechnical investigation of the site generally supports that infiltration is possible. Although additional testing to confirm groundwater depth will be required when the final stormwater report is prepared. It's the applicant's burden to demonstrate the proposed rain garden will be designed and constructed to meet applicable city public works design standards. With a tentative subdivision application, the city typically receives a preliminary stormwater report. As a condition of approval for the subdivision, a final stormwater management report will be required to be submitted prior to final plat approval. This includes a requirement for necessary infiltration testing, confirming depth of groundwater, and it could result in modifications to the facility if required to comply with standards. Public Works design standards also require an infiltration rate of 0.5 inch per hour. Preliminary testing of the site indicates that infiltration rates are closer to 2 to 3 inches per hour. The infiltration rates help ensure that ponding is minimized. This helps reduce or prevent conditions that would encourage breeding from mosquitoes. And going back to the stormwater plan that's shown here, you can see that there's indications of pre-existing drainage patterns on the plans, which generally go to the northwest. There is an emergency overflow point that's identified for the proposed rain garden. And the preliminary stormwater report indicates that if stormwater will overtop the rain garden, it will sheet flow off the site in its historical route as it did in the pre-development condition. A private stormwater facility maintenance agreement is also required to be recorded against each of the lots that are created by the subdivision. Collectively, the property owners will be responsible for long-term maintenance of the rain garden. This is an agreement that's between the city and the property owners and is enforceable by the city. So if plantings are failing or deteriorate over time, or if there's other deficiencies in the facility that are properly maintained, the city can inspect and enforce. And staff is recommending that the planning commission affirm the decision of the planning commissioner. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there questions for Mr. Pancom from the applicant?
I would like to know,
Commissioner Heller, could you speak into the microphone?
forget to do that. Sorry about that. What I was interested in, we got a letter from Mr. Dunning. And he was talking about blue light and excess lighting. Do you have any information on that?
I don't. I think there were some health concerns that he was speaking to.
Yeah.
I think he was concerned about streetlights. I don't recall if with the street improvements there would be a requirement for additional streetlights.
Okay.
To be installed. Construction planners here may be able to have an answer to that.
I don't know off the top of my head, but it's fairly standard to install street light. There's not one within a specific spacing, so it's possible that it could be included in the street improvement, but I have to look at the spacing.
Okay, thank you. I'll wait. I'll take my turn.
Are there other questions? Commissioner Faulk?
At the risk of sounding like I only have one intent to be on planning commission, are there sidewalks included on the right of way streets where these homes would be constructed?
Don't think you'll see them on the plan, but the conditions call for improvements to local street standards along Park Avenue, which would include sidewalks and street trees.
On Park Avenue, but does it include the street that people will take to their house?
The flag lot access way doesn't have a sidewalk.
So where do people walk? In the street?
It would be along the flag lot access way.
So, right, in the street.
If you want to call it a street, yes,
Okay.
flag lot access way.
In the driving space.
Are there other questions? Commissioner Heller?
I was also interested in about, again, this is, I've been reading Mr. Dunning's objections. And he said the back of his lot floods and as well as some of his neighbors. So is is that gonna be influenced at all by the flag lot? Do you understand my question?
I do, so, and our infrastructure planner Laurel's here. Maybe able to speak to some of the stormwater requirements that, the subdivision have to do.
Great, thank you.
Laurel Christian, infrastructure planner. So this area of town is fairly old. There's not a lot of existing stormwater infrastructure. My assumption is that is the reason why they're experiencing issues in wet weather season. So, as Aaron indicated, this new subdivision is required to treat and detain stormwater. So their facility will collect all of the rainwater from the impervious surfaces, the roofs, the driveways and everything, and bring it into a rain garden, which then it will be in that rain garden until it infiltrates back into the ground. And that is consistent with our stormwater standards. Like Aaron mentioned, they are required to detain up to a 100-year event, which is 1% chance of happening in that particular year. So it's the highest event that we regulate to, and they're meeting that standard. So I think they're probably going to be improving the situation for their site, and then, like I said, they're meeting the standards as they've indicated in the preliminary stormwater management report.
Are there other questions? So I have a question now, based on Commissioner Fox's question. So regardless of what we call the thing that allows people to get to their house, and I know we've been building more and more flag lots, is that correct? In any case where there are flag lot access ways, are there any sidewalks that have been required in the past?
So it's not part of the typical, design requirement for a flag lot access way. I don't know if I can say for certain that, flag lots haven't required sidewalks. In fact, I think have had sidewalks required along flag lot access ways in some cases.
And do you recall at all in what cases triggered the requirement of a sidewalk?
I mean, I think they would usually be for cases that are, asking for alternative street standards or asking for adjustments. Which this case is doing both.
And this flag lot serves how many families?
It would serve 4 single family dwelling units.
So that's how many, I guess, yeah. So many people it would serve. So do we have any idea, just like I know we have like trip standards, so if we look at a house, for example, like we have a single family house, how many trips does that generate in a day?
A single family is about 9
About 9
average
trips.
daily trips, which is
So we have 4 families, so we'd be looking at 36 car trips a day on that access way. That's what we would estimate based on that. Okay. Thank you. That was my question. Any last questions before we turn? Go ahead, Commissioner Bureau.
Are there sidewalks along Park at all for the rest of the trip? So if someone were to walk out of there or try to walk somewhere, could they do that?
The commission will require them to construct sidewalks on their frontage, but off to that, there are no sidewalks along Park Avenue for the majority of the street.
And I assume that we cannot condition beyond their frontage.
I do not believe you would have the nexus to do that in this case, no.
I tried, so I thought that was the answer. Are the trees staying? The large structures, are those staying on?
So they do have a tree conservation plan that's submitted with this application. 7 trees that were identified on the tree conservation plan. I believe 4 of them are being preserved. And 3 are being.
Okay, I might come back to that. If there's a chance to take a look at that during the next part of our conversation. So the applicant like to make their presentation at this point? And would you state your name and address for the record, please?
My name is Don Jensen. I live at 5190 Kale Street, Salem, Oregon.
Thank you.
Yeah, I've been a home builder and developer in the Salem area since 1996. Built probably 700 homes in the Salem area. Actually, my son is owning the house that's existing, so we moved in there and remodeled it. Trying to be a good neighbor, that's one of the reasons we decided to go with single family homes. One of the options was to do a cluster, we could have put 8 units in there. But just looking at the area, we kind of thought this would be the highest and best use for that. Just to go over the 4 things in the appeal and stuff, and we really tried to be a good neighbor, and making sure that we communicated with folks. We tried to do that, storm drain through, Mr. Hanson's property, but he decided he didn't want to pipe through his property, which is his right. And, we understood that, so we looked at the other options, and that's why we had a soil tested and figured out we could do this detention pond. And we think once the homes are built and controlled, it's gonna be a lot nicer for the stormwater to go somewhere. Eventually, if the city ever does put a storm into Park Avenue, we'll be able to connect up to that with that, just like everybody else. The other thing we're trying to do is that, the House Bill 2001, you can put duplexes on every single lot now in the city of Salem. Because it is 2 tax lots, we could actually not do the subdivision and just submit, and we could actually put in almost 12 homes in there. If we went that route, we decided not to. I think that was the highest best fit for the area. The thing about the neighbors, we're trying to be good neighbors and stuff, but to the south of us, we have a neighbor that runs a commercial business out of that. And it's not our issue, but we've never brought that up as a thing that he should have a commercial business running out of a residential area. Yes, multiple cars coming in and out. So then we complain about cars for residential. But we have a driveway for each home, that's 2, and then we also have a garage, it's both 2 cars. So that's 4 cars. So just most of those houses in that older neighborhood only have one car garages. So think about that when we look at that. The other thing we did is that we are going to be cutting some trees down, so they're kind of old out trees that have some issues and stuff like that. But Mr. Hanson took down 6 old growth trees and didn't have a problem dropping them on our property and taking those out. I don't know if you got a permit or not. Wasn't our issue. It's his property, do what he wants with it, but a good example that we're trying to be good neighbors too, but we had to do a permit, we had to do something to the city, let them know what trees were taken out, which ones were preserving, and then we have to preserve during construction, we have to put a fence around it and all those things like that. At that point, we don't know if he ever got a permit or what he did with those trees. And also, we did find out later that some of the trees that we did take out, that he took some of the wood and never asked the owner of that, the property. The other thing too is the statewide goal 10 is that obviously looking for density and affordable housing. I've been building affordable housing in Salem since '96. So I think this is a great project for that. We think that the house would be in the right price range. It doesn't be nice if it's in the county, but building permits are $33,000 now. So just to get a permit, so to build, so that money goes back into the coffers to help maybe future for storm drains, parks, or all kinds of fees that we could use for that stuff. The biggest thing I think that was concerned was that about the storm drain. And obviously we have to build that to standards. We had a geotech that now tested, found that the ground perks really well there, which is some areas like the South End, West End, it does not. So we think controlling that's gonna be a lot better for if you drive around town in certain areas, you'll see that a lot of storm detention ponds hardly ever have water. Because by the time the water gets there, it's all percolating on through, so you don't see it. And last thing they brought up was about livability. A lot of people, there's some beautiful big lots there, and I think people can enjoy those, and that's their prerogative. But there are a lot of people who do not want big lots. They just want a nice home and a small backyard for pets and kids and stuff like that, and a great park. So we think that this is what is going to be needed. It's transition. I've been pushing the city, talking to mayors over the years about infill, a plan that we should actually reduce all the SDPs for infill, so we get more of that, because that's kind of what we're seeing, what more people want. Instead of, personally, I think it's better than apartments. But that's kind of our plan. Any questions?
I think I get to ask that, but that's okay. I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Do you have an opinion on the staff report? Are you supporting the staff report? Would you like to change the staff report?
No, I think overall Aaron's done a great job and the city does a good job overall, so we're supporting that staff.
Are there other questions for the applicant? Okay, thank you very much. I think now I get to go to, if there are anyone from the homeowners association. So not homeowners, I'm sorry, the neighborhood association, that's the word I'm looking for. There's someone from the neighborhood association. You have 5 minutes. If you could state your name and address, please. In 4 minutes, the green light will flash to yellow. If you need that much time, and that will be your indication to wind up.
Okay,
10 minutes.
I have 10 minutes.
If you want.
If you're representing the neighborhood association. That's right.
But
I've
you are
been
not
trying to
required to
whittle
use
this
all
down.
10 minutes.
Oh, great, thank you. Okay, I'm Deanna Garcia. I'm the chair for the North Lancaster Neighborhood Association located in Ward 6. There's a few things on the staff report that I want to address, and that were brought to my attention by the Hansons. The first item is the number of flag lots being increased for this particular development. I understand that middle housing and increased density are the goals for the city, and additional housing is needed. The livability of the existing community and potential habitants of the new units needs to be overlooked. If the number of lots will not be reduced for this development, perhaps the positioning of those newly constructed homes could be done in a way to allow for continued privacy of the existing homes and future enjoyment of the new property's occupants. The next item was the lack of on-site parking. We understand that the change to parking minimums was handed down by legislative action, but it's okay to encourage developers to support peaceful, flexible livability for current and future residents. Perhaps the occupants of these new homes will not own any vehicles because they'll be completely dependent on the inadequate transit system here in Salem, and they'll feel safe enough to walk on the non-existent sidewalks on Park Avenue to get to the nearest stop. Or perhaps they'll be compelled to ride a bike along the crumbling asphalt where a bike lane would exist in a community that already has the infrastructure to support developments with no parking minimum. And the last item I want to address, which seems to be the biggest issue for this particular area, is stormwater. In the staff report, it starts off with a generalized statement about stormwater management and that all subdivisions are required to meet a standard minimum. However, the existing management facilities present along Park Avenue are not up to standard. Public Works has received numerous calls from residents along this stretch of Park Avenue regarding stormwater runoff, standing water in their yards and around their foundations, and leaking or failing foundations during heavy rain. These calls have resulted in no true action being taken. Residents are told something is planned or engineers are looking into it. On a bike ride recently, I went to count all the stormwater basins that are present on Park Avenue. There are 12 street level drains along Park Avenue, 8 on the west side and 4 on the east side, and they're all located near the north at Sunnyview Road and at the south at Morgan Street. There are none located between 1804 and 1955 Park Avenue. Just one street over is Evergreen Avenue, and there are 7 drains on the east and west sides of the street, totaling 14. But most importantly, there's an asphalt curb that runs along the west side of Evergreen that guides the stormwater to the drains that are present. If the city's Public Works Department, Development Services, and its engineers are aware of issues with stormwater management along Park Avenue, why wouldn't this be a priority to fix now before this development is built, potentially compounding the problem? Wouldn't it be more efficient to install or connect the new homes to existing stormwater facilities while work is already being done to connect to the water and sewer lines? On page 10 of the Udell, I don't know how to pronounce it, engineering report dated April 2nd, 2024, it states the subject property is located inside the city's urban service area and adequate facilities are available. Water, sewer, and stormwater infrastructure are available along the perimeter of the site and appear to be adequate to serve the property as shown on the tentative plan. On page 14, a tentative design for stormwater was submitted for approval as suggested in this report. The findings were based on infiltration test results and a preliminary site plan showing the tentative location of stormwater facilities. How can these tests show anything but hypothetical results if there are no structures built no foundations excavated, and the test was completed during a period experiencing low rainfall. It is the applicant's burden to demonstrate the proposed stormwater management plan will work, but whose burden is it after the city affirms the design and construction? The neighbors experiencing flooding during the rainy months? There are neighboring homes near this property that are 80+ years old with basement foundations that could fail if the stormwater is not managed properly with this development. The plan is to record CCNRs for the collective property owners to maintain the rain garden. Will this collective group include all 6 lots or just the lots immediately adjacent to the rain garden? And who will enforce the CCNRs? And at what point does the city take serious action if proper maintenance and repair has not been done? When a child or a pet drowns in the standing water, an unchecked infestation of mosquitoes, or flooding damage to the flag lots themselves or the neighboring properties. In the staff response on page 5, it states design standards do not require fencing around private stormwater facilities. However, there are building and safety standards for protections in certain circumstances. The Building and Safety Division has indicated that because there are no structures or walking paths adjacent to the proposed rain garden, that no fall protection would be required. Do the homes constructed on lots 3 and 4 not count as adjacent structures? Anyway, the North Lancaster Neighborhood Association fully supports the addition of housing units within its boundaries, but only if it means continued livability for existing and future residents. NOLA asks that the Planning Commission pause on affirming this development until the stormwater management concerns are addressed. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there questions? I have one question for you. So we have an engineering report that says that the proposed stormwater facility, the rain garden, is going to be adequate to capture and treat all of the runoff from impermeable surfaces. So that's what the engineering report is. If we can't rely on that, what should we use as a commission to decide how that stormwater should be addressed? And it's not a trick question, it's like something that we're trying to grapple with, like, that's what we get a professional report that advises us, this is what works. What do we do then beyond that?
I have similar questions about the engineering and development use to plan that rain garden, but I'm not an engineer. And I don't play one on TV, so I just have to go with whatever's being told to me and hope that it works out, and these neighbors don't have to worry about their basements being flooded.
Thank you. Oh, sorry, Ms. Garcia, with a staff question.
It seems like you maybe were reading those remarks. Have you submitted those into the record, or were you just reading them tonight?
I was just reading my testimony.
Would you like to submit them in just so we have them in writing? They're still in the record since you spoke, but it might be easier for us, for the record, if they were submitted.
Sure, I can send them by email. Who do I send it to, Karen?
I just want you to give them to him now, if you could.
Okay.
Because there's potential that the hearing could be, or the record could be closed tonight, and it'd be too late to submit.
I will email them right now.
Thank you. Thank you. I believe we now move on to our sign-up sheet. Oh, I'm not going to. Mr. Hanson.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Bruce Hanson, at 1884 Evergreen Avenue. I'm in the lot just behind the development there. And I have some prepared remarks, but I think I have to address a few of Mr. Jensen's, if I can remember them all, Mr. Jensen's comments. He said we denied access to stormwater hookup on Park Avenue, which is, I'm sorry. Oh, on Evergreen, yes. Because there is stormwater access on Evergreen. And maybe you can even see on the map there, the lined sort of football field. That's part of our property. We've got a geothermal heat pump with about 1,500 feet of pipe in the ground there. And no, we don't want stormwater piping going through there. That's part of the reason we decided not to do that. As far as taking down old growth trees, bordering the property there, I planted those so-called old growth trees myself.
So I would not call them old growth trees. I was gonna think in 1990, as I said, people see this. And the neighbors to the south of Lake Place, really surprised that he says that they're running a business. He's got a plumbing business and he does not do any plumbing work at his house. So I don't know why he's being accused of operating a business out of his house. Those are things that just came to my mind off the cuff here. There are a number of reasons that we filed this appeal. Some of those issues were responded to in a satisfactory manner by the planning staff and are no longer of a concern to us. However, there still are 4 other issues for which we are not satisfied with the planning staff response. And I'm going to be repeating some things that have already been mentioned. The first of these concerned the overflow potential of the stormwater collection basin, the rain garden. As you can see, or they saw on the map, it covers a large area. It's like about 30 feet by 80 feet. It's located very close to 2 bordering properties, one of them being ours. This means that as it reaches capacity, it will raise the groundwater table in the surrounding area. In the winter and the springtime, the groundwater seems to be very high. The water pools up in places as was mentioned. And then when it overflows, since it's not connected to the city's storm sewer, it will overflow onto the neighboring properties. The planning staff response included the following, I quote, I think Mr. Panko already mentioned some of this. The design standards require the stormwater flow detention be designed to detain a 100-year storm event. A 100-year storm event, according to the City of Salem records, has happened 3 times in the last 60 years. The last one, I think, being in 2012, the first one in 1996. It actually doesn't take a 100-year event. All it takes is a real good rainstorm to really cause some issues with pooling water in the area there. We'd also like to point out that the groundwater table, as I mentioned, is pretty high. And that, yeah, it does get fog like most of the winter in that area and early spring. Our second concern also relates to the stormwater. This one was mentioned before, would seem to be an ideal breeding place for mosquitoes. Planning staff did not have an answer to this that we were satisfied with, other than the state. Standards do not, I'm quoting here, do not specifically address mosquitoes. As described, these standards do prioritize infiltration through the growing medium, and as such, ponding will occur in some stormwater events. That being said, the standards do establish minimum infiltration rates of the soil to allow complete infiltration facilities. This ensures ponding is minimized. The proposed rain garden meets the minimum infiltration rate requirements. That's a quote. This may be the case, but most of us know it doesn't take too much water sitting around or for it to sit around too long for it to be able to breed mosquitoes. So that's still a concern of ours. Third thing, we had concerns about the lack of parking. This was mentioned before. We submitted photos demonstrating an already existing problem in our evergreen block involving 2 flag lot homes accessed by one narrow driveway.
Mr. Smith, I just want to remind you of less than a minute.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Finally, we've got concerns about the limits on the subdivision or the flag lots and subdivision being at 15%. And the reason was the small size of the property, the infill nature of the development. hypothetically, let's assume that it was a larger development. And that there were 9 lots along the street, the north side of the flag lot driveway, 8 lots to the south, that'd be 17. This would allow for 3 flag lots. 20 altogether, 3 flag lots, 3 out of 20 is exactly 15%. That's hypothetical larger division. So I'm just doing kind of the logic here. Why on a smaller division are they allowed to do more than that? Why are they allowed to do 4?
Thank you very much. Ms. Garcia, Deanna Garcia.
Oh, you're just kidding.
Excellent. Okay. I have a Mr. Jensen. You already spoke. Linda Hansen. Thank you, Ms. Hansen. You have 3 minutes with the yellow light flashing.
Thank you, Scott.
Okay.
I'm Linda Hansen, 1884 Evergreen Avenue Northeast. I also represent 1904 Evergreen Avenue Northeast, where our mother-in-law lives, and had submitted comments on her behalf before. So greetings, thank you to the staff for all your work and for hearing this appeal. I'm not opposed to development taking place at all. I understand completely that there's a housing shortage and a need for infill. My comments are meant to encourage well thought out and planned development that doesn't penalize existing homeowners and gives developers every opportunity to make the most money possible without considering the impacts on the livability of the neighborhood. I'm not opposed to the developer being given a greater adjustment than the 15% allowed by the code. There's a need to create a flag lot and the 15% adjustment doesn't allow for that. We would be supportive of a 33% or 50% adjustment, a healthy adjustment allowing for 1 or 2 houses behind the existing homes or the lots on Park. I have grave concerns about the 66% adjustment for the following reasons. This is creating the opportunity for at least 8 households on the acre due to the ADUs being allowed on properties on Park Avenue, with 1 currently under construction. Mr. Panko did state that ADUs currently aren't allowed on flag lots, but there are a lot of things that weren't allowed a few years ago that are being allowed now. And so I don't think that this is saying that ADUs won't be allowed there in the future, and we could be creating 12 additional households there. The huge variance sets an unusual precedent for the neighborhood, filling large lots because it's filled with large lots that will be changing hands over time. If this overly large adjustment is granted, there's nothing to prevent similar adjustments to every lot going up and down Park, and then the attempt of the flag lot limitations in the code is completely circumvented. The developer isn't required to build a street, which we understand, but he's also saving a great deal of cost relative to building in a typical subdivision by not doing so. I would urge you to require the upgrade and development of the west side of Park Avenue all the way to Market Street and Sunnyview Avenue to give the additional pedestrians a safe way to walk down Market Street and Sunnyview Avenue and to access bus service. There's currently no sidewalk and people are already parking in the bike lane. I took pictures as soon as we did the appeal, and there are people parking all over the flag lots, bike lanes, and such. So I think what's really important is for you not to set up a situation that's unsafe to people. Park Avenue is currently built only to rural street standards with no curbs, gutters, or sidewalks. This subdivision is bringing urban density to Park Avenue Northeast and should be required to provide a safe way for residents to walk to Market Street. So I think that you really have a choice, and that is to either go for urban density, but then require urban street standards, or just approve 2 houses behind and have it more rural. Thank you. And I'll email you my comments because I wasn't able to.
Thank you. Before you step down, let me ask if you have any commissioners have a question. And Mr. Hand, thank you.
Could I respond to the question you asked?
You have a couple more minutes left.
Oh, I thought it was flashing.
We made a mistake, and I apologize for that. We made a mistake for Mr. Hanson, and I will try to rectify that in a moment.
Okay. So I will just say then, I will continue. I have major concerns about the stormwater plan for the adjustment of 66% that the city is wanting to approve. I don't understand why the developer is not required to connect to the stormwater system on Market Street to handle overflow, and instead is being allowed to have an overflow into existing property owner's property. He's bringing urban density to the neighborhood and should be held to the standards for that construction. We're told that the rain garden can handle a 100-year rain event with only a 1% chance of that occurring each year. However, according to the city's own website, as my husband mentioned, there have been 3 100-year flood events in the last 60 years, which raises that probability to 5% per year over the last 60 years. So I personally think that that standard needs to be changed because you're forcing upon the existing neighbors who already have water, all those impervious surfaces are just going to help the developer make more profit, especially if he's not required to connect to the city's stormwater system. Climate change being what it is, the likelihood is that these type of rain events will occur more often in the years to come and not less. The water table varies greatly, dropping significantly in the summer months with standing water occurring on the properties in the winter months at times. If the water table is measured in a dry period and the detention basin is designed based on the results of a test during the dry period, the rain garden will be even less capable of handling rain events before overflowing. To recap, I'm not opposed to development taking place on the spot. I care deeply about our neighborhood, having been the neighborhood watch coordinator, organized National Night Out, have over 40 people attend this year from my street. We want to sustain the livability in this diverse part of Salem with people of all ages and family varieties, enjoying the opportunity to live together in this older and established part of Northeast Salem.
Thank you. All right. And I suppose, Fred, that you would like her to submit her comments,
Yeah,
if you're willing to do that.
I think I heard her say that she was gonna submit those to Mr. Benko. But I do it right away just in case the hearings, the record was close to that.
Okay,
So.
I'll do it.
Okay. Thank you. And just one moment, please. I think, Mr. Hanson, I encourage you to step down before I had a chance to ask commissioners if they had any questions. So let me just turn to the commissioners and say, does anyone have a question for Mr. Hanson? Okay. Oh, thank you. Mr. Dan Lowry. Thank you, Mr. Lowry. I can now tell you have 5 minutes. And the light will go off at 4 minutes.
Good evening, Salem Planning Commission members. My name is Dan Lowry. I own and reside at 1895 Evergreen Avenue Northeast, which is a half a block from the subject of the appeal. About 25 years ago, a similarly poorly planned infill development known as Jimmy Court, contiguous to my property, was approved. City planners allowed dozens of truckloads of fill to be hauled into the Jimmy Court site in order to elevate the grade of the divert water onto my property. So, as I anticipated, additional surface water created a swamp during the winter in my backyard, which is about 9/10 of an acre, killing a number of fruit trees. Under the proposal of the applicant, when winter storms cause overtopping of the so-called rain garden, neighboring properties would be adversely affected. This is another example of Salem planning allowing developers to profit excessively off to the expense of neighboring properties. Multiple adjustments are requested by the applicant in order to meet profitability goals of the developer. Adjustments are the new euphemism for variances. What do you call them, adjustments or variances? They're really degradations to the health and safety of the residents in the neighborhood. Please take note, Planning Commission members, that the proponents of the proposal do not live in or have a stake in the livability of the Lansing neighborhood. All the opponents of the proposal are neighborhood residents who have seen and lived with similarly poorly planned and poorly executed infill development. I'm supportive of well-designed development, but the requested adjustments necessary to complete this development are a threat to community health and safety and would not come close to the definition of well-planned. Those are my comments, and if anybody has any questions, I'll try to address them.
Are there any questions? I guess I have one question.
Yes,
So one of the things that I heard from the applicant and from staff is that the applicant has the legal ability to build something, to build structures here that would allow more people to live in this space than what they're currently proposing. So they're asking for an adjustment in order to create 4 housing units, but they could do something much, much larger without needing any permission. Do you have any thoughts on that? Because what I hear about that is this is a better deal for the neighborhood than they could get. So any thoughts?
oh, I would just point out some of the existing infill developments in the neighborhood that have serious problems with water runoff, parking issues. We've experienced these kinds of infill developments previously, and it's not been a good result for livability in the community.
Okay, thank you. I think the applicant has 5 minutes if they'd like to use it to rebut. Or something.
I just like to reiterate, we chose to go only 4 houses on the flag lot and then instead of building the chance to build 8 to 12 units on that property. So thinking about the neighborhood and all those type of things. The other thing is that we're building the frontage of our property, we're putting a full street improvement, so there'll be sidewalks, there'll be a planter strip. There'll be potential for a storm drain when it ever comes into that. One of the things that you could do as a neighborhood, part of it, I'm on my neighborhood. At the Northgate, I'm the land use guy, so we deal with this stuff all the time with people flooding and all this type of stuff, but we talk about, you could do an LID, you could do a utility LID, I don't know if Salem does that or not. You guys could grab all your neighbors together and put together a plan to put in a storm system, and that would help the city to do that. Obviously, it'd be a little bit more of a tax burden, but if you spread it out among all the residents there, that 1,500 feet of frontage on Park Street and probably Evergreen too, you could get a storm system there out to market and say, I don't know, if the city of Salem do LEDs, utility LEDs?
We'll let the commissioners ask some
Okay,
questions.
Anyways, I just wanted to point that out, that we were really trying to think of special, and my son owns the house that has the ADU, so I do. I'm sure I'll be there for a barbecue.
Anything else?
Thank you.
Oh, before you leave, sir, do commissioners have any questions for the applicant? Yes, Commissioner Truitt.
There was a preliminary stormwater report that identified infiltration testing was performed. Can you tell me when that was done?
It was in June, I believe it was in June, yeah.
This most recent
Yeah.
June?
I can look to see actually.
Is there any other comparative survey for other seasons, maybe the wet season, rainy season?
That report actually designs for what the filtration is, how much is water. So what they do is they dig a couple of test pits. They did one in the upper east or west, northwest corner. And they also did one in front of the ADU house. So what they do is they dig a test pit and then they fill it with water and they see how fast it can drain. So the idea is that, so when the wet months come, they'll have an idea how fast that drains through there. So that's kind of overall what the report's all about.
Any indication as to how that might be affected as the water table rises?
Yeah, I mean, feed factors, Dan Redmond's been around for 30, 40 years in the Salem area, so he does a lot of reports. So they calculate that in there, they calculate how fast it filtrates through, and then, when it's full of water, obviously that's showing right there that there's water in there,
So it does account for variables in the existing soil moisture above and below, more or less.
I'm sure that he has some calculation. I'm not an expert in that thing, but I can tell you that he's done a lot of reports for the whole city.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions? Commissioner Paul?
Yes, and this might be better for staff, but on the off chance that was the stormwater pond, was that designed based on maximum impervious area for each lot specifically? Or was it how did you decide on that scale?
Well, we submitted the house designs, kind of what we're gonna to build, and then the maximum that we could build on there based upon the size, and that's how we did that, so. So we use the maximum, so we build minimum, they'll make us adjust that, to whatever the needs are, so.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Commissioner.
One follow-up question here. Your preliminary stormwater management report does not identify an overflow plat, which we've heard about. But it does show an emergency overflow structure at the northwestern corner of the rain garden. This is in the staff report. I didn't see the plans. Can you elaborate on what that might be?
Right now, the water flows to the northeast, so that would, that would actually flow out to the northeast of that, if it ever will.
Well, what the structure is at the northwestern corner of the rain garden?
But the rain garden's in the southwestern corner of that property. And what it showed on the old designs and stuff like that, the water flowed actually to the northeast, so we're kind of reverting it.
Now, do you know what the structure might be? It's noted on page 60. Yes, it's. All right. I'm good.
All right. Thank you very much. All right. So, do we have questions for staff? I think we do. Do we have questions for staff? I know I do. It's Commissioner Truitt, Commissioner Fox, do either of you have questions you want to the staff? One moment, okay. I'll ask my question. What experiences have we had with rain gardens in terms of both, accidents or injuries to people and pets, and to kind of pestilence or mosquitoes, other issues like that? We must have had some experience now. We've done rainstorms for a number of years.
So for the fall issue, the plans, you can't really read it on the screen, but the bottom of the pond is elevation 192 and the top of the pond is 195 at a gradual slope. So when looking at the needs for fall protection, those would typically be required when you're seeing some kind of like straight wall and then the stormwater facility. In this case, it's a gradual slope and it wouldn't trigger the need to have any fall protection fencing around it. That was what building safety indicated when I asked them about this specific situation. A lot of the stormwater facilities we see with walls do have fencing on top of that, but this is not that case. So, and then in terms of mosquitoes, I don't really have a lot of experience with whether or not that's truly been an issue. The design standards, like we've mentioned, identify minimum infiltration rates that are needed to kind of ensure that ponding issue is not happening, but I don't think mosquitoes specifically are something that we can regulate for.
Okay, just one more then. The issue of the changing water table depth. I assume the water table does change between summer and winter, and that when in designing this, that needs to be taken into account. How's that done?
That would be a question for the applicant's engineer or their geotech. I will say though that the stormwater report is preliminary that we get with land use. There's a lot more calculations, testing, information that goes into the final stormwater report. So it's possible you could see additional testing in a final stormwater report and things like that that would ensure compliance with the standards. We have consultant reviewers that review stormwater reports. I don't personally review them. They've indicated the preliminary stormwater report complies with our preliminary stormwater report standards, and they would also ensure that the final stormwater report complies with those standards.
Thank you. I have one more question, but I'll ask if my colleagues do. Oh, sorry. That was such a polite, I'm not used to that.
We'll start throwing things.
Okay, sure.
this is kind of not off topic, but we just voted in a tax for sidewalks and things last year. Do you know if this Park Avenue is on that list of sidewalks that are going to be developed?
I looked at both the capital improvement project maps, which are separate from the bond project, and then I also looked at the maps for the bond projects, and sidewalks along Park were not identified in either of those lists.
Okay, not the best news, but, so does the commission have any authority to require stricter standards than what the city might apply in something like the stormwater situation?
I would defer to the city attorney.
Well, there are approval criteria, and so we could impose conditions to satisfy the approval criteria. And sometimes there are more subjective, approval criteria like livability, things like that, and then you get more discretion on what kind of things you might add. But with more straightforward ones, which I believe the stormwater are, if you're gonna go above and beyond what's required by the code, then that would run into problems of being unreasonable conditions.
So absent of a contrary or contradictory stormwater report or some other evidentiary basis, it would be hard to exceed the city's standards on something like an engineering specification.
Right, well, they're the standards that they have to meet, and then they have a report saying how they are meeting them. If for some reason, like say there was a, opposing engineer who said, no, those aren't gonna meet them, then you might be able to require more, but you have to be able to justify why. Or you have to say why what they're submitting is not meeting the standards, why what you're requiring is necessary to meet the standards. If you're specifically saying, well, I'm gonna meet the standards, but we want more, that's what you can't do.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions? All right, thank you. Is there anyone who'd like to hold the record open?
I have one more question. Or maybe just a clarification. Since this is a preliminary storm water report and the detention area is sized currently based on maximum buildable area, is there an understanding that might change? And can one of the conditions be that detention pond size is revised based on the final stormwater report?
Laurel, to you.
Thank you. So the preliminary stormwater report, like you said, it's looking at worst case scenario. I don't think the applicant would intentionally build something that was too large. So the final stormwater report would address the final sizing that they need. And if they wanted to build something larger, I don't know what standard you would apply to say you can't do that.
I'm not advocating for it in general, I just wanted to confirm whether or not that what is currently shown can and potentially change that size.
Yes, that is possible.
Okay.
And if I can just follow up to make sure I understand correctly, so the final sizing of the stormwater infrastructure is based on the final amount of impermeable surface that's being permitted. Is that correct?
Correct.
Thank you. Now I get to ask if anyone would like to hold the record open. Fred tells me we're good. I'm going to close the public hearing. And I will look to Commissioner Heller for a motion.
I move that we accept the staff report on sub addition J 24-04 for the 1800 block of Park Avenue Northeast.
Thank you. Is there a second? Commissioner
This is Jordan, I will second.
Commissioner Truitt seconds. All right. Is there anything else you'd like to say, Commissioner Heller or Vice President Heller, about the motion?
Nope. Thank you.
Any questions or any discussion that you'd like to have? Commissioner True, please.
No, I just want to say to the people who spoke publicly, thank you for your comments. I hear them. I think this is a delicate situation where we need additional housing and we want environmentally responsible methods for dealing with stormwater. And I think more or less for now, those boxes have been checked, but I'll be eager to see, because this is a preliminary geotechnic investigation, how the rest of it plays out upon further action within the land use and development. So, but your concerns have not gone unnoticed.
Thank you, Commissioner Truitt. Are there other? I probably at this point need like wild hand waving to Commissioner Vaughn.
Yes, I echo Commissioner Truitt's comments. I think I would just say that, you know, generally speaking, the geotechnical and infiltration testing is a tried and true method of understanding the viability of green water storm management on the site. So I would certainly trust in that. And speaking to the livability side of things, I think with our earlier discussion, thinking about the sidewalks and adding some form of pedestrian circulation within this subdivision. It is a, you know, it's sitting relatively central within the overall very large block. And if that was an opportunity to start to improve the overall structure of this area so that it is a more responsive and safe place, I think, you know, anytime we can take small steps toward improving an overall area, we should take those opportunities. And any new development, even though we can't necessarily use it to require a sidewalk along a very long stretch of adjacent street, we can start to look at ways to mitigate that safety concern within the property. That's an opportunity. I think we should pursue it.
Do you have a motion to suggest?
Is this the time?
Are there other comments, other questions? So I have a comment or a question, and I don't know, Craig, can I ask a question of staff at this point? Even if it's
Yeah, we just can't,
rely.
yeah, we just can't submit new evidence. We can ask for clarification there.
So I guess the question I will ask is, does the planning commission have the ability to take into consideration the status of existing infrastructure when it makes its decision about infill building? If that makes sense. I don't know which of you, many people here would like to answer that question.
So is there a specific utility infrastructure you're wondering about?
Well, clearly stormwater.
Stormwater.
And we have the pedestrian infrastructure, bike infrastructure as well.
So the criteria that you have allow us to look at how the development will be served with public utilities. And in this case, the applicant has demonstrated that their facility does not need to be connected to a public system because it's completely infiltrated up to our design storm event. And so there would not be a need, for example, to have them extend the public main in park from its existing terminus approximately 400 feet north. If they could not, and that was a requirement for them to discharge into that, so if their preliminary report is demonstrating you can't infiltrate, you need to go into a main, then in that case, I think that the planning commission could, under the criteria that you have. Utilities and streets are slightly different. So for street improvements, we very clearly have a boundary street requirement, which is one, again, your approval criteria that is compliant with that, but there's not a clear and objective standard to require an off-street improvement in this case. The property is within our urban service area, so it does not require an urban growth declaration. If you are outside of that mapped area, it does, and in that case, you could require offsite improvements. But this proposal did not trigger that application. So under the criteria of approval that you have, I would say there's not a way to get there with the streets or the utility.
Okay, thank you. So I'll go ahead with my comment then, and this was really directed at the neighborhood association and the people who came in to speak. And again, like Commissioner Troop, I appreciate you coming in. One of the very difficult things that we have is when we listen to people from the neighborhood association and neighbors raise objections and we are not able to address them or we disagree with those comments, and we wind up voting to move ahead, which is what I will be doing in this case. I recognize it makes people feel like they weren't heard. In this case, I feel like I've heard your comments. Some of them I don't entirely agree with, and some of them I don't feel like we have any authority to do. One of the big challenges that we're having as we're dealing with infill housing is that, like your neighborhood, like Lansing, it does not have the infrastructure for a lot more people to move in. Yet that is exactly what is going to happen. The legislature is requiring us to add more housing, and that's going to be a lot of infill housing, especially in neighborhoods like yours that have large lots. And we at the Planning Commission are not able to stop that process because the streets, the sidewalks, the bike infrastructure, the storm infrastructure is inadequate, and we're dealing with your current problems. That is outside our problem. I've said that to the city council. I think we are aware of it. I know in part that's why many people voted for the bond initiative, because that's part of the long-term solution to that. But my sense is this is going to be a problem that we are all going to be wrestling with for the next 20 to 30 years. And it's extremely frustrating. And I'm sorry that we on the Planning Commission cannot do much about that. So that is my comment on this, but I will be voting yes, because I do think the applicant met the burden of the criteria as listed in our code. So that's where I'm at. And I don't know if anyone else has something to add before we vote. All right.
Did we have a motion, Councilor Fott? I'm not sure.
Can we make that?
Yes, now's the time.
Well, I would like to make a motion that we require sidewalks along the flag lot access way to each of those lots.
Let me ask for a clarifying question before I ask for a second. Are you looking for it on both sides of yes? And Laurel, do we need any size specifications or any other design specifications?
Yeah, sorry, this is a private flag lot, so the street standards would not apply in this situation. I'd be preparing or looking.
So then would Commissioner Fott need to specify sidewalk dimensions or anything?
Yes, we would need to know the dimensions for the sidewalk. So a recap here, the 4 lots served by a flag lot access way requires a minimum easement width of 25 feet and a minimum paved width of 20 feet. The dimensions for each of the lots are exclusive of the access way, and we have lots that are very close to the minimum lot size. So we need to know, I guess, if there's a requirement for increasing the easement width. That may have implications again on lot size, and then we need to know the sidewalk width.
You're really making me make some decisions tonight.
All right, this is a little bit complicated. Oh, Olivia. Oh, sorry.
May I add something? So Olivia, acting as planning administrator, I would say that generally in the past, when we've done adjustments that have required flag lot access ways to put sidewalks in, it's generally been on one side. So 5 feet on one side, which can typically fit into that 25 feet. That's the nexus we've used before in relation to the adjustment. Just to give you that context of what planning division has done in the past.
Does that change? Commissioner Fott, does that change your motion at all?
Yes, I think so. Then based on that and the existing easement proposed, I think that that would be an acceptable compromise.
Okay, so could you restate your motion?
Yes, I would move that we require a 5-foot sidewalk on one side of the flag lot access way.
Thank you. Is that enough, Laurel, to write the? Oh, it's Aaron, sorry. Aaron, is that enough? Okay, now, can we get a second, and then we can go to questions? Is there a second? If not, then the motion fails. Okay, so the amendment fails. Go ahead, Commissioner Truitt.
The comment I was gonna add is kind of a double-edged sword, and adding sidewalks would shrink the lot size, but it would also add the impervious surface, thereby increasing the amount of potentially discharge into the storm swell or the rain garden. if you will.
Commissioner Falco.
So the single sidewalk would fit within the existing easement, right? So the lot sizes would not change.
So. But it would add additional concrete on the side of the road for more impervious stormwater runoff. That's where I'm conflicted on, because if our concern is stormwater and capacity of stormwater retention, by adding more impervious surface, my layman's perspective leads me to believe that it would add more runoff.
I believe that the current stormwater detention is based on the worst case scenario, which would most likely not, well. I am sure that the buildable area will not be built to within the inch of its available space, but if that were the case, then yes, that would happen. Most likely, my expectation is that it would still fall within existing stormwater pond size, which will also likely shrink based on the final results.
Thank you. I think that was worth having a conversation, so thank you both. I think now we get to call the roll.
Commissioner Roth,
Nay.
Commissioner Heller,
Aye.
Commissioner Rhodes. Aye. Commissioner Slater,
Aye.
Commissioner Truitt,
Aye.
Commissioner Villarreal.
Aye. All right, motion passes. Now we are up to us. Oh, okay, I guess we'd like a 5-minute recess. and turn it over to Mr. Chandler for our special orders of business and our surprise presentation of stormwater
Cool, surprise presentation.
and timely surprise.
So I am Robert Chandler, Assistant Director of Public Works here. And when I asked to talk to you about proposed amendments to City Revised Code chapters 70 and 71, I did not know stormwater could be such a featured item on this. Although I do have to note in a multi-Python kind of way and now for something completely different. I'm here to talk to you about the So I'm here to talk to you about this courtesy briefing of proposed amendments to City Revised Code chapter 70. Chapter 70, the actual title of it is utilities, but we're just making changes to the definition section of that. In chapter 71, stormwater. Big picture, the revisions, the proposed amendments to these two chapters are based on requirements given to us by the State Department of Environmental Quality. I'll talk more about that very shortly. First, though, I would like to thank this group of people in the creatively named Stormwater Advisory Group. It consisted of a number of engineers, you probably see a lot of them here, and architects, environmental advocates, city council. This is the group that met 7 times in the past 5 months. Primarily, we're working on revisions to the public works design standards. How do you meet the code? But we also talked about the actual changes to the code language itself, and I'm indebted to this very lively group that we met so many times, and the final product is indeed a whole lot better because of their contributions to the project. I will also now start with what I call my decoder ring. So we use the word municipal stormwater permit, occasionally municipal stormwater discharge permit. That is the permit that allows us to discharge sale stormwater into waters of the state, like creeks and the Ohio River. It is issued to us by the Oregon Department of Environmental Quality, DEQ, is issued under the authority of the Federal Clean Water Act, which in itself is a shorthand for the Federal Water Pollution Control Act, the Federal Water Pollution Act amendments, the Water Quality Act of 1987, and it goes on. The Federal Clean Water Act is the federal law that allows us to get a permit to discharge basic pollutants in the waters of the state. It is issued to us under a program called the National Pollutant Discharge Filtration System, NPDES. And that is issued for us to have discharges from our municipal separate storm sewer system. So sometimes our world is full of that soup. We call it the municipal stormwater permit. Some people call it NPDES MS4 permit issued by DEQ, and now you know the code. It is again a permit issued by the federal under the federal law. Big picture, we're proposing amendments to those 2 chapters. The amendments, actually 2 parts of that. One, to comply with the requirements of our municipal stormwater permit, and the other one is to address lessons learned. We've been doing primarily this code unchanged the past 10 years. We're addressing lessons learned from that, and some of our practices we're going to codify. The definition section is really the only thing we changed. SRC chapter 70, and then they were changed to support what we have to do in chapter 75. And the big thing in chapter 71 is on post-construction stormwater requirements. This is after a new development or redevelopment project. What do you have to do with stormwater? You already heard parts of that. This codifies those requirements, primarily discharges, flow, dealing with peak flows and flow volumes, and leaks coming off that site for water quality. And the code has to be effective by our permit November 1st. So the ordinance that we're bringing before council next month, in fact, has an effective date of November 1st. We've been talking about flow control and treatment. This is an example of a flow control facility. It is a stormwater detention facility This is over on the corner of Auburn Road Northeast, Portland Road Northeast, for the East Park, that's big subdivision. That's an example of a stormwater flow control facility. And there is a very local example of a stormwater treatment facility, a right-of-way planter. This is on a very own Front Street, just kind of around the corner. Designing your flow, and again, we just do this. So, summarizing the changes that we're putting in, this first San Revised Code, chapter 70, we're we cleaned up the language, cross references. Like, why do I have to define earth material in 70 when it's already defined in 82? And also we basically cross references, contaminant equals pollutant, these are our code, things like that. Pretty mundane. Again, we're aligning the definitions to align with a permit. More about that later. Among the big changes, I'll talk about this, is we are required to implement these changes to reduce the threshold that triggers treatment requirements and flow control requirements. Currently, it's 10,000 square feet for anything other than a single family residential project. It's going down to 5,000 square feet. It affects actually relatively few projects in the grand scheme of things, but Department of Environmental Quality says let's go that threshold of 5,000. We also had new definitions. One of them just. So we talk about flow control. Flow control does two things. One, it reduces the risks of flooding for downstream properties, and the second one is it reduces that potential harm done by these high flow rates on our creeks. There are some receiving water bodies that really don't care about either. If you discharge the Lake River, it doesn't really do. So we have in our we have the mechanism to call up, is it in a flow control exemption area, in which case that allows us to exempt a project. So we actually notify that into the code. A number of things that are currently codified, we're moving to the public works design standards. Public works design standards are an administrative rule. Administrative rules have a different process to be approved. It's much more straightforward, I think. It involves fewer. Well, it's done administratively, and the authorities with the director, in this case, the public works, our elected officials are informed of it. The appointed officials are informed of it, but we're moving a lot of things into the public works design standards as an administrative rule. They don't need to come. That's it from chapter 70 from definitions. In chapter 71, again, aligning current practices with codifying current practices. I just roll through these. 71.025, that's right, section of fee in lieu. We added provisions so that not only do you have, can you use the fee in lieu for a new facility, you can also use the fee in lieu for retrofitting an existing facility, which makes sense. If it's existing, why build a new one, you expand the capacity. We prohibited discharges, that now aligns with code. Land divisions, this is an intriguing read of the way the language is. So basically, make sure it's clear. If you do a land division, you have to do both flow control and treatment. The current version says you have to install a stormwater facility. Stormwater facility is a stormwater flow facility or treatment facility. Either qualifies. So we want to make sure that it's not or flow control and or treatment. And this one, our current code talks about single family residential projects. Our current code actually, there are only two kinds of projects: single family residential and everything else. What we did is we called them residential projects and incorporated definition, modified the definition in 70 here to account for middle house, duplexes, etc.
I'm sorry, Robert, I have a question on that.
Yeah.
Does that mean that middle housing is exempted, or does it bring in middle housing? Which way does it go?
It means that middle housing is incorporated into the definition of residential projects. Residential projects have a different set of requirements than all the other projects. So we just incorporate. It's good. 71.087 requirements for city projects. This is kind of an intriguing thing because city projects don't get city permits. And for anything other than a city project, you get a permit, that permit by state, by our own code and state law has a vesting, set of vesting requirements in it. So when is a city project vested in old code versus new code? So we have a section in the code that talks about this, so I adjusted the dates are there now. And essentially what locks a city project into a current set of requirements. Is it in our adopted capital improvement program? Is it part of the voter approved financing? So the voter approved, the projects that were approved by the bond can be invested in the old requirements, not the new ones. Is it part of a grant application? And that's it. So we incorporate investing into city projects. This is, I talk about flow control exempt areas. Treatment requirements, so the permit adjusts the thresholds and also adjusts the performance requirements for treatment. Now we incorporate those treatment requirements in the code. For the permit, the water quality design storm has to be retained by their provisions around. So that's just the DEQ is making is requirement. Those are it's like big picture highlighted changes. We've been fairly robust in the public involvement. We briefed the public for the Home Builders Association of Maricopa County back in February about this. They actually gave us a representative who sat on the Stormwater Advisory Group, Rick Massey, for Richard Massey Construction. The Stormwater Advisory Group met 7 different times, beginning in March and was recently last week. It's a great group, really is. We have a public website that has a lot of information and notices, has a Q&A section on it. It has the links to the staff report. We did our DLCD notice. Public hearing notice, that should say August 12th. It's a, this project is the first time we've used a sale report in the Statesman Journal. It saved us something in the vicinity of $1,000 or more. I'm not sure the number. So it got posted August 12th, sorry for the typo, and it's still up there notifying people of the public hearing. There we go. Oh, the public notice, hearing notice that was mailed out. Sorry, that was the one mailed out to neighborhood associations, Marion County, their population. Then here's the public notice posted. It's been there since August 12th. Hard copies both at the library and our own customer service centers been there since August 14th. I checked with the Salem Reporter, City of Salem Recorder. Nobody has yet commented on revisions. Big picture, City Council conducted first reading and established this public hearing back in July. So we're here. Next Monday is a public hearing. If the public hearing goes well, council adopts it, no carryover or extension, then we'll be back to the council for second readings. Third, which gives us plenty of time for effective on the due date of the first. That, yes, that concludes my briefing substitute.
All right, thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Champlin?
Sure.
Go for it, Commissioner Truitt.
Why not? While you're up there. Let's see. I'm on the water wastewater task force, so different than SWAG, but fascinating concept nonetheless. And there's a little, yeah, very fascinating. Actually fascinating. And it relates to this and our past, most recent item that we dealt with is infrastructure. And aging infrastructure and a lot of infrastructure that is needed of improvement and a lot of stormwater flow. To my question, with these rain gardens and Isles wells, do you anticipate to see an impact from that or a lightening of the stormwater load on the system? Or a beneficial impact other than the obvious, I suppose?
The answer is yes. Further into that answer is that our view, my view is every little bit helps. It's rain gardens do reduce pollutants that go into our creeks. Primarily, those facilities are primarily for treatment, and they want to reduce pollutants that get into our creek and water, pollution on the bodies, many of which are actually salmon there. And then further downstream, everything drains to the Willamette River, our downstream neighbors for that. For flood risk reduction, I never say flood control, for reducing the risks of floods. The facilities do participate. It's complicated. But our view is that everything that helps, that's what we require, pressures that we have. Thank you. What?
Are there other questions? Unsurprisingly, I have a few, but I will try not to keep us long. Can you tell us just Can you tell us just a word about the levels of our existing streams? As I understand, part of the requirements that, DEQ is involved in part because of pollution mitigation. And I understand that a number of our streams, especially our larger streams, Mill Creek, we have some pollution issues and we have some mandates that we need to meet. Is that correct?
That is broadly correct. I don't really know specifically which creeks have those loads. I believe what Commissioner Slater is referring to, yet another one, I did not put a total maximum daily loads. This is a mechanism also of the Federal Clean Water Act, and the regulators, in our case DEQ, delegated by the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, establishes how much pollutant can you actually put into a receiving water body, and they incorporate that into this TMDL, total maximum daily load. Some of our creeks have total maximum daily load established for temperature. High temperature is a form of pollutant, primarily for salmonids with very narrow temperature ranges that actually they can operate in. And so we try to manage temperatures primarily with riparian cover trees. So we do have that. To be clear, our municipal stormwater permit is focused, I'll say exclusively, almost exclusively on pollutant and water quality, not flood control. Flood control aspects of the storm, that a lot of conversations about a 100-year storm, we try to manage different levels of storm events. That is city driven. I will just put a plug that the city of Salem is the top 1% of over 1,700 communities that participate in. It's called a community rating system. It's how we manage flooding, flood risk reduction and regulations and floodplains is managed by the Federal Emergency Management Agency. And we're really good. And because of that because of that CRS rating, every resident in the city of Salem gets a 35% discount on their flood insurance premiums. And while I'm here with the microphone, if you're in doubt, get flood insurance because the waters follow Newtonian physics and flow mechanics that do not know where the city is drawn the flood plain. So, yeah, the flooding is not.
All right, so to clarify, the federal mandates that we're operating under and the state enforces is really related to pollution and water quality.
That is correct.
And it's the city is taking on the responsibility of flood management.
That is correct.
So my last question, I had many more, but I did cut them. So my last question is, do you have any comments related to what you heard from the Lansing folks that testified?
I don't have any direct comments. I mean, I did not.
I guess should I rephrase that?
Oh,
I don't think we should be making any sort of discussions about that particular case. That would
So let me, so we've got
reasons not to do that.
We have parts of the city with older infrastructure that have been developed under previous flood control standards. And occasionally here, we hear about those concerns in the context of new construction and infill development. Do you have any thoughts that you want to share about that particular situation?
I will start talking and watch the attorney for non-voting accused. So a lot of the areas that have inadequate flood stormwater infrastructure are because we incorporated those over the years over county. County had different set of requirements. They have informal drainage system, ditches and culverts. So we inherited that, we deliberately got So there is inadequate infrastructure throughout the city. There's also the issue of redesigned stormwater facilities using fairly rudimentary modeling. That underestimated sizes that we need over time. And so that's a legacy issue. We are not alone in that as a city, certainly. So there is that. We are working very hard to improve our creek system. Creeks are part of our drainage system. And we're trying to protect the creeks by reducing the flows as well as improving the habitat. I can go on and on about that. I will, and I don't think this infringes into territory, but I can talk a few moments about the 100-year storm. So the 100-year storm, it is a statistical derivation based on years of rainfall data. But it's only statistics and it is not reality. It's based on a lot of data and in a Turnian computer model that I don't know about. And it is defined as every year there's a 1% chance, a 100% chance that we will get that volume during that period of time. It doesn't mean that you only get one storm like that in 100 years. In fact, if you do the statistics, if you live 100 years, you got a 64% chance of seeing, 63% chance of seeing 100 storm. It has to do with the probability of it not flooding that year, and it is it's a power ratio. So it is statistically viable to have more than 100 storm in 1 year. It's all statistics. Changing climates, which threw a big monkey wrench into all of the hydrologic modelers that I have. It's complicated. So you do the best you can with the information that you've got to design as ethically and responsibly as you can. But if you take pristine river valley 50 years ago, and you put a city in it, 185,000 people in that city, things happen. That's my big message.
All right, thank you.
Yes.
Any last questions? No, if not, we'll move to subcommittee reports. Subcommittee reports? No, there are not. Planning administrators report.
Good evening. The only thing I have, as you can see on the fly sheet, you have two items on the 17th and no items on the 3rd. So do we want to cancel September 3rd?
I'm inclined to do so unless there's objections from a majority. There are not objections. So that is canceled.
All right, and then we'll have Jennifer cancel it.
Anything else?
I don't have anything else.
Nothing else. All right. Are there any comments for the good of the order? I'm not seeing any, no wild hands waving, which is apparently what I need, so we'll move on. Any comments, any final comments that are not on the agenda from members of the audience? Again, seeing nothing, I will adjourn.